In this lesson, we'll begin our discussion of the heart. We'll introduce the heart. We'll take a look at the pulmonary and systemic circuits, which are very important to circulation. We'll take a look at where the heart is located, and then we'll finish up this lesson by taking a look at a protective covering around the heart known as the pericardium. So the heart is part of a system known as the cardiovascular system. In addition to the heart, that includes the blood that the heart is pumping, and then all of the blood vessels that the blood is being pumped into. Right? We're going to see there's a combination of arteries and veins and capillaries, that type of thing. They make up the blood vessels. Now, the heart beats about 100,000 times each day, and it pumps about 8,000 liters of blood per day. Right? Very active tissue. So let's take a look at the pulmonary and the systemic circuits. Anytime, first of all, before we begin, anytime you hear the word pulmonary, think lungs. So very simply, the pulmonary circuit is going to move the blood to and from the heart and the lungs. All right, so we're going to see, for instance, deoxygenated blood is going to go from the heart over to the lungs to become oxygenated and then return back to the heart. That would be the pulmonary circuit. The systemic circuit is going to include all the blood that's going to be oxygenated but being sent out to the rest of the body. So let's go to a picture for a moment. I blew this picture up on the next slide. I just want to kind of give you an overview. What we're looking over here in blue is the right side of the heart, and then over here in red is the left side of the heart. So in these textbooks, when a blood or the blood is painted or colored blue, that signifies that the blood is deoxygenated. So notice that on the right side of the heart, the blood is deoxygenated. On the left side of the heart, the blood has been painted or colored red, indicating that it is oxygenated. So what I did was I just kind of blew up that picture to show the heart a little bit easier. What we can see here on the right is deoxygenated blood, and then it's going to get pumped to the lungs. So this over here represents the capillaries in the lungs, right? And the same thing over here. Once the blood has been exchanged, gases have been exchanged where oxygen goes into the blood and CO2 comes out of the blood is going to return back to the heart here oxygenated. So notice it's coming back to the left side of the heart oxygenated. This movement of the blood to the lungs and then back to the heart right over here is known as the pulmonary circuit. Okay, so that's the main thing about the pulmonary circuit. Remember, it's going to be bringing the blood to the lungs and then back to the heart from the lungs. The systemic circuit, so once the blood comes back to the left side of the heart over here, it's going to get pumped out through a big blood vessel over here. We're going to talk about this in subsequent lessons. That is known as the aorta. The oxygenated blood is going to be pumped into the aorta, and then the aorta is going to put the blood into all of the arteries that go to our tissues and organs and systems and that type of thing. So hence the name, the systemic circulation. All right, so if we take a look over here on the left side of the heart here, the blood has come back from the lungs oxygenated. So what we're going to do is once it gets into the left ventricle, we'll see that in a minute, once it gets into this chamber here, it's going to get pumped into this big red blood vessel. This is the aorta, and from here all the arteries are going to come off to supply our organs and tissues. Right? That is going to be the systemic circulation. So I've been using the term arteries and veins and capillaries. Let's define them before we go on any further. Very simply, a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart is known as an artery, right? Remember, artery, away. It's always going to be carrying blood away from the heart. While veins, on the other hand, are going to move the blood in the opposite direction. Veins are always going to bring the blood back to the heart. Right? So all the veins in the body are always moving blood back to the heart. Somewhere in between the arteries and the veins are these small microscopic blood vessels known as capillaries. You can even think of them as exchange vessels, meaning that this is the site where blood gases are going to move in and out. For instance, out in the tissues, the capillaries, oxygen will leave the bloodstream and go into the cells, while carbon dioxide comes out of the cells and goes into the bloodstream. Nutrients are going to be moved, waste products are going to be moved. So these again are small blood vessels, right? They're usually microscopic, and they allow for the exchange of dissolved gases. And again, the perfect example there is CO2 and O2. Nutrients, right? Things like glucose, amino acids, that type of thing. And then even waste products are going to be removed. So that's always going to happen in the capillaries. We're going to get more into this in future lessons in more detail as far as their structure. So it turns out that the heart has four chambers. We just looked at them quickly. I'm going to go back to that picture in a second. Let's just take a look at each one of the chambers and again see how it applies to the pulmonary and the systemic circulation. We're going to start on the right side and then move to the left. So the top chamber on the right is known as the right atrium, right? When you look over here, again, this is the female's right side, so this is the right side of the heart. This top chamber here is going to be the right atrium, and notice it's receiving deoxygenated blood from the systemic circulation. So once the systemic circulation has deoxygenated blood in it, it all returns to the heart on the right side. So it's going to go to the right atrium. From here, the right ventricle is going to receive the blood. So the right ventricle is then going to pump the blood into the pulmonary circuit. If I go back to that picture here, notice the right ventricle is here. It's going to pump the blood into this artery that's going to go to the lungs. There's one on this side, and then there's an artery going to this side over here. This the right ventricle is pumping into this pulmonary circuit. Now, the left atrium is going to receive the oxygenated blood back from the lungs. So we go to the left side now. Here's the left atrium, here's the left ventricle. Notice that the lungs are sending the blood back to the left atrium. Right, so it's receiving from the pulmonary circuit here. And then it's going to send the blood down to the ventricle on the left, and this is now going to pump into the systemic circuit. So when this side of the heart pumps, it's actually going to push the blood into this big red vessel here, known as the aorta. Okay, and that aorta is going to feed the rest of the body. So the left ventricle is pumping into the systemic circuit. Okay, so it's good to just kind of separate the heart left and right. On the right, it's going to be the deoxygenated side. On the left, it's going to be the oxygenated side. Okay, so now that we know the two circuits, let's take a look at some of the anatomy of the heart. Let's start with looking at where is the heart. So if you were picking up a heart model in the lab or you were doing dissection, you would see that the heart is a triangle that sits right behind our breastbone known as the sternum. But when we place it into the chest, the base of the triangle actually is superior, and then the apex or the point of the heart, the tip of the heart, is going to face inferior. So the base again is going to be at the top. You'll always be able to find the base also because you're going to see there's a bunch of big blood vessels attached to it that we call the great vessels. I mentioned before the aorta. Another one you may have heard of is the superior vena cava, maybe the pulmonary trunk. These would be all great vessels that are located at the top. While the apex is going to be somewhere between the fourth and fifth intercostal space. All right, that's going to be the space between the ribs, and it's roughly mid-clavicular line. If you went to your mid-clavicle and just kind of drew a line straight down, go to your fourth, fifth rib space, all right, that's about where the apex of the heart would be. And then we're going to see in a moment that the heart sits between two pleural cavities in a big structure known as the mediastinum. So let's take a look at how the heart sits in the chest. So here's our breastbone. This would be the sternum. Directly behind the sternum is the heart. So this is the right side of the heart. This is the left side of the heart. So this top part here is the base. And again, if you look at the base, there's big blood vessels. One here, one there, one there. These are called the great vessels. They're going to be up top, while the tip of the heart here is the apex. And notice it's between the number 4 and the number 5 rib. If you drew an imaginary line from his clavicle, right, it would be right about mid-clavicular, for the most part. Right. So now, what is this mediastinum? Let's take a look here. This is the gentleman's right side. Here's his right lung. Here's his left lung. Between the lungs, this big structure here, even including the windpipe, all of this here is known as the mediastinum. It's like a midline wall. And the mediastinum on the lower part has the heart, and then up top it has the great vessels. We'll see the superior vena cava, the aorta, pulmonary arteries or pulmonary trunk right here, the trachea, the esophagus would be in here. That top part is all these structures, but the bottom part is the heart in the pleural cavity. Right, so this whole midline wall, if you kind of follow my cursor down, is the mediastinum. Right? It's the region between the lungs. Okay, so let's take a look at this pericardium. Think of the pericardium as a double lining of the pericardial cavity, and it's this lining that's actually going to surround the heart. We're going to divide the pericardium into two parts. The first part is going to be the outer fibrous pericardium. So if you were doing dissection before you got to the heart, you would actually have this kind of tough bag that you would have to cut through in order to see the structures inside that bag. This tough bag is the outer fibrous pericardium. Then lining the inside of that fibrous pericardium is an inner serous pericardium. So whenever you see the term or hear the term serous, think of a thin, slippery fluid. This serous pericardium produces a thin, slippery fluid that's going to surround the heart and kind of lubricate the heart and reduce friction. We're going to divide the serous pericardium into two layers, right? Two parts. I'm going to come back to this cavity here in a minute. Let me show you what I mean. So we're going to go to this picture here. I'm going to show you an analogy first. If you took a balloon, right, and you blew it up, and you then took your fist and pushed it into the balloon like this, your fist would represent the heart, and the balloon, this white line here touching your fist, would be the lining on the heart. This is known as the visceral pericardium. Visceral means organ, so it's the pericardium that's on the organ or the heart. Then this other wall here, if you follow my cursor around, this other wall going down here, this other membrane, I should say, going around here, this is the membrane that's up against the cavity wall, right? So it's kind of lining the cavity. This is known as the parietal pericardium, right over here. Anytime you hear the word parietal, think wall. That's what parietal means. It forms the wall of a cavity. So what we have here is two membranes, right? It's actually all one, but their location is different. The membrane on the heart itself is the visceral pericardium, and then the membrane lining the cavity wall, like over here, is going to be the parietal pericardium. Then in between, right here where my cursor is a space. That space has that thin, slippery fluid in it to reduce the friction as the heart's moving inside that cavity. Say it's beating 72 times a minute, that's producing friction. We can reduce that friction by the pericardial fluid, that serous fluid. Okay, so visceral pericardium, parietal pericardium, pericardial space. Now, just outside the parietal pericardium, this is where the fibrous pericardium will be. This is kind of that tough bag I was talking about before. That would be located outside this blue, very thin line over here. This outside that would be kind of a thicker connective tissue. So let's take this now and transpose it to here. All right, so here's the heart. This would be like the fist pushing into the balloon. The white line on the heart would be the visceral pericardium. Then there's a space, that's the pericardial space. The other white line is the parietal pericardium, and then if you look just outside it, all of this connective tissue here is the fibrous pericardium. Okay, so just kind of going back to the notes for a minute. So the outer fibrous pericardium, right, that's that tough bag that surrounds the entire heart and its structures. The inner serous pericardium is on the inside of the fibrous pericardium, and you need to know it has two layers. The outer layer is the parietal layer. That's going to line the cavity wall. And then the inner layer is the visceral layer. That's going to line the heart or cover the heart. Notice, we'll see this in a subsequent lesson, that we can also call the visceral layer of the pericardium the epicardium. That's an alternate name we can use. Right? And then finally, the cavity that's in between is going to be the pericardial cavity. Okay, so that concludes this lesson on some of the introductory structures of the heart, including the pericardium, including the location and the difference between the pulmonary and the systemic circuits.